The weapons depot buzzed with the usual morning chaos of military requisitions. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood in line behind towering Corvallian warriors, whose chitinous armor clinked with each movement, and sleek Vortanian officers whose blue skin shimmered under the artificial lights. The Galactic Defense Force had representatives from dozens of species, but humans remained the newest and least respected members. Sarah clutched her requisition form, watching as each alien received their standard-issue plasma rifles, energy shields, and combat enhancers. The Corvallians got heavy artillery that could punch through starship hulls. The Vortanians received elegant beam weapons that could slice through reinforced steel like paper. Even the diminutive Zelexians were handed advanced pulse cannons that hummed with contained energy. When Sarah finally reached the counter, the Thrakari supply officer barely glanced at her. His four eyes moved independently as he processed other requests while addressing her with obvious disinterest. The creature's scaled hide rippled with boredom as he examined her paperwork. Human designation Sarah Chen, service number 2847 Delta. He droned through his translator unit. Standard human allocation includes one basic energy pistol, emergency rations, and communication device. The officer reached beneath the counter and produced a weapon that looked more like a child's toy than military equipment. Sarah stared at the pathetic device. The energy cell indicator showed it would last maybe 20 shots before needing replacement. The targeting system consisted of basic iron sights that belonged in a museum. She had trained for 3 years at the academy, scored in the top percentile of her class, and demonstrated tactical brilliance that impressed even her instructors. "Sir, I believe there's been a mistake," Sarah said carefully. "My combat scores qualify me for enhanced weaponry. I've been assigned to the frontline reconnaissance unit." The Thrakari's laugh sounded like grinding metal. Around them, other aliens paused their conversations to witness the entertainment. A group of Corvallian soldiers began chittering among themselves, their mandibles clicking in what Sarah recognized as amusement. Enhanced weaponry for a human? The supply officer's translator barely contained his mockery. "Your species has been part of the GDF for exactly 18 months. You lack the natural armor of the Corvallians, the energy manipulation abilities of the Vortanians, and the collective consciousness of the Zelexians. Humans are suitable for basic support roles only." Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "My service record shows otherwise, sir. I request access to standard infantry weapons per regulation, 347B, which states that all GDF personnel receive equipment appropriate to their assignment and demonstrated capabilities." The depot fell silent. Other species rarely challenged supply decisions, accepting their designated roles in the galactic hierarchy. The Thrakari's four eyes now focused entirely on Sarah, studying her with newfound interest that seemed more predatory than respectful. "Regulation 347B, he repeated slowly. "You've memorized the equipment protocols." His scaled fingers drummed against the counter. "Very well, human. Since you're so eager for proper weaponry, let's see what the system recommends for your specific file." The supply officer activated his terminal, Sarah's service number glowing on the screen. His casual expression shifted as data scrolled past. The chittering from the Corvallians stopped abruptly. Even the usually aloof Vortanians turned to observe the interaction. Sarah watched the Thrakari's four eyes widen simultaneously, all focusing on the same point on his display. His scaled skin shifted from brown to a pale yellow that Sarah had learned indicated shock or fear in his species. The officer's clawed hands hesitated over the controls. "This cannot be correct," he whispered, more to himself than to Sarah. "Your file shows standard human classification, but there's an additional designation I've never seen before." The supply officer's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Other aliens in the depot began moving closer, sensing something unusual in the interaction. The air itself seemed to grow heavy with tension as various species focused their attention on the small human female and the increasingly agitated Thrakari. "What designation?" Sarah asked, though she had no idea what her file might contain beyond standard service records. The Thrakari looked up from his screen, his four eyes studying Sarah with an expression she couldn't interpret. Fear mixed with something else, perhaps recognition or dawning understanding. His voice carried a tremor that his translator couldn't quite mask. "Black Talon," he said quietly. "Your file is marked with Black Talon classification." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every alien in the weapons depot took an involuntary step backward. The Corvallians' chittering became rapid and agitated. The Vortanians' usual calm composure cracked, their blue skin shifting to darker shades. Even the confident Zlexians huddled together, their collective consciousness apparently sharing some knowledge that made them distinctly uncomfortable. Sarah had never heard the term before, but the reaction around her suggested it carried significant weight. The supply officer's hands shook as he input new commands into his terminal, accessing weapon stocks that apparently required special clearance. "I apologize for the delay, Lieutenant Chen," the Thrakari said, his entire demeanor transformed. "Your equipment will be prepared immediately." The weapons that emerged from the secured storage areas bore no resemblance to the toys initially offered to humans. These were instruments of war that made even the Corvallian heavy artillery look primitive by comparison. General Varric strode through the corridors of the command ship with the purposeful gait of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. His reputation preceded him wherever he went in the Galactic Defense Force. As a Corvallian who had earned his position through 2 decades of brutal combat, he commanded respect from every species in the Alliance. The urgent message from the weapons depot had interrupted his morning briefing on the upcoming Sector 7 campaign. Supply disputes were typically handled by lower-ranking officers, but this particular situation required his immediate attention. The mention of Black Talon in the communication had sent cold fear racing through his chitinous exoskeleton. Barracks had hoped never to encounter that designation again. His last experience with Black Talon personnel had left scars that ran deeper than the physical marks crisscrossing his armored hide. The memory of watching an entire hegemony battle fleet reduced to floating debris by a single human operative still haunted his dreams. The weapons depot buzzed with nervous energy when he arrived. Aliens from various species clustered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones while casting fearful glances toward the supply counter. The sight reminded Varric of prey animals sensing a predator nearby, though none of them could articulate exactly what they feared. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood alone near the counter, examining a weapon that made Varric's blood run cold. The device appeared deceptively simple, resembling a standard energy rifle, but he recognized the subtle modifications that marked it as something far more dangerous. The power core alone contained enough energy to level a city block, while the targeting system could track and eliminate multiple targets across impossible distances. "General Varric," the Thrakari supply officer called out, relief evident in his translated voice. "Thank you for coming so quickly. We have a situation that requires your expertise." Varric approached slowly, his 4 compound eyes studying the human female with new understanding. She appeared unremarkable by human standards, standing barely 5.5 feet tall with dark hair pulled back in regulation style. Her brown eyes showed intelligence and determination, but nothing that obviously marked her as extraordinary. "Lieutenant Chen," Varric said carefully. "May I see your left shoulder?" Sarah looked puzzled but complied, rolling up her uniform sleeve to reveal her upper arm. There, barely visible against her pale skin, was a tattoo that made every alien in the vicinity take another step backward. The mark was small and simple, just a black silhouette of a diving raptor, but its significance was unmistakable to anyone with sufficient clearance. "When did you receive this mark?" Varric asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 years ago, sir, just before I entered the academy," Sarah replied. "A man approached me after I scored perfect marks on the preliminary examinations. He said I had been selected for a special program, but that I wouldn't understand its purpose until the time came." Varric nodded slowly, pieces of a terrifying puzzle beginning to fall into place. The Black Talon program was humanity's deepest secret, known only to the highest levels of command across the Galactic Alliance. Even most humans remained unaware of its existence, believing their species to be the weakest members of the GDF. "What do you remember about this man?" Varric pressed, Sarah's brow furrowed in concentration. "Not much, sir. He was tall, probably in his 50s, with gray eyes that seemed to see everything. He spoke very quietly, but there was something about him that made me listen to every word. He said I had been chosen to represent humanity's true potential." The general's mandibles clicked involuntarily. Gray eyes were a marker of the original Black Talon operatives, humans who had undergone genetic modifications that enhanced their natural abilities to impossible levels. If this woman had been personally selected by one of them, Her potential was beyond anything the galaxy had previously witnessed. "Have you experienced any unusual abilities since receiving the mark?" Varix asked. "Enhanced reflexes, improved pattern recognition, increased physical strength?" Sarah hesitated, glancing around at the assembled aliens who hung on every word. "I've always been good at reading tactical situations, sir. My instructors said I had an intuitive understanding of combat scenarios that seemed almost supernatural, and sometimes I see connections that others miss, patterns in enemy behavior that help predict their next moves." Varix felt his exoskeleton begin to itch, a sign of extreme stress in his species. The young human was describing early manifestations of the enhanced cognitive abilities that made Black Talon operatives so devastatingly effective. Given proper training and the right equipment, she could potentially outthink and outfight entire enemy fleets. "Sir?" the Thrakari supply officer interrupted nervously. "The computer is requesting additional authorization codes for the advanced weaponry. The system shows Lieutenant Chen has clearance for equipment I've never seen before." Varix turned to examine the supply terminal, his worst fears confirmed by the weapon specifications scrolling across the screen. The arsenal available to Black Talon personnel included devices that most species would consider war crimes if used against civilian populations: quantum disruptors that could unmake matter at the molecular level, temporal distortion fields that could slow enemy movements while accelerating the user's reactions, neural scramblers that could turn enemy commanders into drooling vegetables with a single pulse. "Authorization granted," Varix said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. "Give her everything the system recommends." The aliens around them began backing toward the exits, sensing that they were witnessing something far beyond their security clearance. The Corvalian soldiers who had mocked Sarah earlier now watched her with expressions of fear and newfound respect. Sarah looked confused by the dramatic change in atmosphere. "Sir, I don't understand what's happening." "What is Black Talon?" Varix studied her for a long moment, weighing his words carefully. The truth would shatter her understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy, but concealing it would potentially waste the most dangerous weapon the Alliance possessed. "Black Talon," he said finally, "is the reason every species in this room fears humans more than they fear the hegemony itself." The secure briefing room aboard the GDF flagship existed in a state of perpetual twilight, its walls lined with materials that blocked all forms of electronic surveillance. General Varix had chosen this location deliberately, knowing that the conversation about to unfold could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy if overheard by the wrong ears. Sarah sat across from him at the polished metal table, her new equipment secured in specialized cases that hummed with containment fields. The weapons she had been issued defied conventional understanding of physics, incorporating technologies that most species considered theoretical impossibilities. Yet to her enhanced perception, their operation seemed almost intuitive. 47 years ago, Varix began, his four eyes studying Sarah's face for any sign of recognition, humanity made first contact with the Galactic Defense Force during the hegemony's initial expansion into your sector. Your species was classified as a minor civilization, suitable only for resource extraction and basic labor. Sarah nodded, familiar with the standard historical account taught in schools across human space. Earth's integration into galactic society had been presented as humanity's great fortune, an opportunity to join an advanced civilization that spanned thousands of worlds. "What you were never told," Varix continued, "is that the classification was deliberately false. Your species demonstrated capabilities during first contact that terrified the existing power structure of the galaxy. The General activated a holographic display that filled the air between them with tactical readouts and combat footage." Sarah watched herself on the recordings, moving through training scenarios with fluid grace that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Her reaction times consistently measured as impossible, her tactical decisions anticipating enemy movements before they occurred. The first human military advisors who joined the GDF displayed cognitive abilities that our best analysts couldn't explain, Varix said. They could process battlefield information faster than our most advanced computers, develop strategies that consistently outmaneuvered opponents with superior technology, and adapt to new threats with a flexibility that bordered on prescience. Sarah studied the data streams flowing past her enhanced vision, patterns emerging that she hadn't consciously noticed before. The information wasn't just being processed by her brain. Something deeper was analyzing, categorizing, and extrapolating from the data in ways that felt completely natural, yet utterly alien. The Alliance leadership faced a dilemma, Barracks explained. Humanity's potential clearly exceeded that of any known species, but acknowledging this fact would destabilize the existing order. Corvallians had built their identity around being the premier warriors. Fortanians prided themselves on intellectual superiority. The other species each claimed dominance in their specialized areas. The holographic display shifted to show classified files that Sarah realized she shouldn't have clearance to view. Names, faces, and service records of humans who had served with distinction across the galaxy, their true achievements hidden behind false classifications and cover stories. So they created Black Talon, Sarah said, understanding beginning to dawn, a way to use humanity's abilities while maintaining the illusion of our inferiority. Varrix's mandibles clicked in agreement. The program identified humans with the highest potential and provided them with enhanced training, advanced equipment, and genetic modifications that amplified their natural abilities. These operatives were deployed in situations where conventional forces had failed, achieving victories that were then attributed to other causes. The general manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up tactical analyses of major GDF victories over the past 4 decades. In each case, Sarah could see the subtle indicators of human involvement hidden within the official reports. A single operative neutralizing enemy command structures, impossible tactical maneuvers that turned the tide of battle, strategic insights that anticipated enemy movements with supernatural accuracy. How many? Sarah asked quietly. Fewer than 200 active operatives across the entire galaxy, Barracks replied, each one capable of accomplishing missions that would require entire fleets using conventional approaches. The hegemony has learned to fear the mention of human involvement in any engagement, though they don't fully understand why. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she began to comprehend the true scope of what she was learning. Humanity wasn't the junior partner in the Galactic Alliance. They were the secret weapon that kept the entire structure from collapsing under hegemony pressure. Why are you telling me this? She asked. If the program is so secret, why reveal its existence now? Varrix's expression grew grave. Because the hegemony has discovered the truth about Black Talon. 3 weeks ago, they intercepted a communication that revealed the existence of enhanced human operatives. They're preparing a massive offensive designed specifically to counter your species' advantages. The holographic display shifted to show intelligence reports from deep space monitoring stations. Massive hegemony fleets were massing at strategic points throughout the galaxy. Their movements coordinated in ways that suggested knowledge of Black Talon deployment patterns. They've been studying us, Sarah realized, her enhanced perception picking up patterns in the enemy fleet movements that painted a terrifying picture. They know where we operate, how we think, what our capabilities are. Barracks nodded grimly. Worse than that, they've developed countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize Black Talon operatives. New weapon systems that can track your enhanced reflexes, electromagnetic fields that disrupt your pattern recognition abilities, and psychological warfare techniques that exploit the isolation inherent in your role. Sarah stood and walked to the viewing port that offered a panoramic view of the galaxy beyond. Thousands of stars glittered in the darkness, each representing worlds where billions of beings lived their lives unaware of the shadow war being fought for their survival. What happens now? She asked. Now, Varrix said, you become what you were always meant to be. The hegemony believes they understand Black Talon, but they've only encountered operatives who have held back their true potential. The Alliance needs someone willing to show the galaxy what humanity is really capable of. Sarah turned back to face the general, her brown eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that hadn't been there an hour earlier. The mark on her shoulder felt warm against her skin, as if responding to some internal awakening that had been dormant since the day she received it. They mocked me for asking for a weapon, she said quietly. They have no idea what weapon they've just handed me. The training facility hidden in the asteroid belt beyond Proxima Centauri existed outside normal spacetime, its interior dimensions impossible according to conventional physics. Sarah stepped through the transport portal and found herself in a vast chamber that stretched beyond the horizon in all directions, filled with environments that shifted and changed according to the needs of each exercise. Her instructor waited in the center of the facility, a figure that made Sarah's enhanced senses recoil in instinctive recognition of superior predatory capability. The man appeared to be in his early 50s with steel gray hair and the same piercing gray eyes that marked the original Black Talon operatives. When he moved, space itself seemed to bend around him in ways that hurt to observe directly. Marcus Webb, he introduced himself, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies beyond normal human hearing. I was the first successful subject of the enhancement process, and I've been waiting 30 years for someone with your potential to walk through that portal. Sarah felt her newly awakened abilities react to his presence like iron filings aligning to a magnetic field. Every instinct screamed that she was in the presence of something that had transcended normal biological limitations, a human who had become something both more and fundamentally other than his original species. The equipment you've been issued is impressive, Marcus continued, gesturing toward the cases that had followed her through the portal, but it's merely an extension of capabilities you already possess. True Black Talon operatives don't rely on technology. They become the weapon. The training chamber around them shifted, walls flowing like liquid to create a perfect replica of a hegemony command ship. Sarah found herself standing on the bridge of an enemy vessel, surrounded by hostile aliens whose positions and intentions her enhanced perception mapped with crystalline clarity. Standard tactical doctrine suggests a frontal assault using superior firepower, Marcus said, materializing beside her without any apparent movement. Black Talon doctrine recognizes that the most effective weapon is information properly applied. Sarah watched as her instructor demonstrated, his presence seeming to expand beyond the physical boundaries of his body. The simulated hegemony officers began making mistakes, their coordination failing as Marcus somehow influenced their decision-making processes without any visible action on his part. How? Sarah asked, studying the cascade of failures spreading through the enemy command structure. Every sentient species operates according to predictable patterns, Marcus explained. The enhancement process doesn't just improve your physical abilities. It allows you to perceive and manipulate the quantum fluctuations that underlie all conscious thought. You're not reading minds, you're adjusting the probability matrices that determine decision outcomes. The simulation reset, placing Sarah in a scenario she recognized from recent intelligence reports. A hegemony fleet had surrounded a GDF colony ship carrying refugee populations from 3 different species. Conventional wisdom suggested the colony ship was doomed. Its defensive systems no match for the overwhelming enemy firepower. Your turn, Marcus said simply. Sarah closed her eyes and let her enhanced senses expand beyond the normal boundaries of perception. The quantum foam that existed between particles became visible to her consciousness, revealing the underlying information structures that governed reality itself. The hegemony ships weren't just collections of metal and energy. They were complex systems of interconnected decisions and behavioral patterns. She reached out with abilities she was only beginning to understand, touching the probability streams that flowed through the enemy fleet. A navigation officer's hand trembled slightly as he input course corrections. A weapons technician hesitated for a fraction of a second before firing. A commander's certainty wavered as tactical assessments shifted in response to cascading micro-adjustments in his crew's performance. The enemy fleet began to fracture from within. Ships collided as navigation errors compounded. Weapon systems misfired, damaging friendly vessels. Command decisions became increasingly erratic as officers lost confidence in their own judgment. Impressive, Marcus observed as the simulation ended with the hegemony fleet in complete disarray. You managed to create a resonance cascade through their entire command structure. Most operatives require months of training to achieve that level of coordination. Sarah opened her eyes, feeling a rush of exhilaration mixed with deep unease. The power she had just wielded felt natural and terrifying in equal measure. She could sense the vast potential hidden within her enhanced capabilities, abilities that could reshape the outcome of any conflict. The physical modifications are just the beginning, Marcus continued. Your genetic structure has been altered to interface directly with quantum information systems. Your brain can process data streams that would overload the most advanced computers. Your reaction time approaches the theoretical limits imposed by the speed of light. The training chamber shifted again, this time creating a combat scenario that pushed Sarah's enhanced reflexes to their maximum. Energy beams moved toward her in slow motion, while her body responded with fluid grace that seemed to violate conservation of momentum. She found herself dancing between attacks that should have been impossible to avoid, her movements guided by an intuitive understanding of causality itself. The hegemony believes they've developed countermeasures for our abilities, Marcus said as Sarah completed the exercise without sustaining a single hit. They're about to learn that they've only encountered operatives operating at a fraction of their true potential. Sarah felt the mark on her shoulder grow warm, responding to the awakening of capabilities that had been dormant since the day she received it. The tattoo wasn't just a symbol. It was a quantum anchor that connected her to the enhanced information processing network shared by all Black Talon operatives. "How many others know what we really are?" she asked. Marcus smiled, and for a moment Sarah glimpsed something inhuman lurking behind his gray eyes. Within the Alliance, perhaps a dozen individuals with sufficient clearance. Among humanity itself, maybe 50 people across all of human space. The secret has been maintained for 4 decades because the truth would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Humanity wasn't just the newest member of the Galactic Alliance. They were potentially the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. The other races had unknowingly invited their own evolutionary successors into their midst. What happens when the secret can no longer be maintained? She asked. Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. That depends entirely on how we choose to reveal ourselves. The hegemony's offensive will force the truth into the open, but we still have some control over how that revelation unfolds. The training facility around them began to shift once more, but this time Sarah sensed that the changes weren't part of another exercise. Something was happening in the galaxy beyond their hidden sanctuary, events that would determine the future of every species in known space. "It's time," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of preparation. "The hegemony has begun their assault on Sector 7. They're about to discover what happens when they threaten the species that produces Black Talon operatives." The hegemony warfleet stretched across 3 star systems, its massive ships blotting out entire constellations as they moved in perfect formation toward the heart of Galactic Defense Force territory. Admiral Korthak studied the tactical displays from his flagship's command center, mandibles clicking with satisfaction as he observed the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 12,000 heavy cruisers formed the fleet's backbone, each one capable of reducing a planet to molten slag within hours. Swarms of fighter craft moved between the larger vessels like clouds of metallic insects, their numbers beyond counting. Support ships carried enough weaponry to arm entire planetary militias, while specialized vessels housed the new technology designed specifically to counter the mysterious human advantage. "Status report on the enhancement suppressors," Korthak demanded, his 4 compound eyes focusing on the readouts that filled the air around his command throne. "All systems operational, Admiral," reported his chief technology officer, a tall Vectar whose crystalline skin reflected the bridge lights in prismatic patterns. "The quantum disruption fields are maintaining peak efficiency across the entire fleet. Any human operatives who attempt to use their enhanced abilities within our operational zone will find their neural processes severely impaired." Korthak's pleasure was evident in the deep rumbling that emerged from his thoracic chambers. The hegemony had spent 3 years developing countermeasures for the human advantage, studying captured footage and intercepted communications to understand how their enemies achieved impossible tactical victories. The enhancement suppressors represented the culmination of that research, devices that could neutralize the quantum cognitive abilities that made humans so dangerous. "And the psychological warfare protocols?" Korthak inquired. "Ready for deployment, Admiral. Our analysis indicates that human operatives become significantly less effective when isolated from their support networks. The mind fracture transmissions will exploit this weakness, inducing paranoia and decision paralysis in any humans within range." The Admiral's satisfaction deepened as he contemplated the strategic brilliance of the approaching campaign. For too long, the Galactic Defense Force had relied on their mysterious human allies to achieve victories that should have been impossible. Today would mark the end of that advantage and the beginning of hegemony dominance throughout the galaxy. "Contact Admiral Zarex on the 2nd Battle Group," Korthak ordered. "Begin the assault on Proxima Station. I want to see how effective these humans are when their enhanced abilities are neutralized." The first target had been chosen for its strategic and psychological value. Proxima Station served as a major logistics hub for the GDF, but more importantly, It housed the families of many human personnel serving throughout the Alliance. The attack would force the humans to respond emotionally rather than tactically, further reducing their effectiveness. Korthak watched the tactical displays as his fleet engaged the station's defenses. The Galactic Defense Force had deployed their most advanced ships to protect the facility, including several vessels with known human crew members. The Admiral expected to see the typical pattern of impossible tactical maneuvers that had characterized previous engagements with human-influenced forces. Instead, the GDF ships fought conventionally, their movements predictable and their responses delayed. The enhancement suppressors were working exactly as designed, reducing the humans to the level of ordinary beings whose capabilities posed no special threat to hegemony forces. "Excellent," Korthak rumbled. "Continue the assault. I want Proxima Station reduced to debris within the next 4 hours." What the Admiral didn't realize was that his technological countermeasures were working too well. The quantum disruption fields were indeed suppressing human cognitive enhancement, but they were also creating a resonance pattern that registered clearly on sensors designed to detect such interference. Every suppressor activation sent a clear signal to receivers scattered throughout GDF space. Deep in the hidden facility beyond Proxima Centauri, Marcus Webb studied the incoming data with an expression of grim satisfaction. The hegemony had revealed the full scope of their countermeasures, providing exact specifications for the technology they believed would neutralize Black Talon operations. "They've made the classic mistake," he said to Sarah, who stood beside him watching the tactical displays. "They developed countermeasures for the capabilities they've observed, not the capabilities we actually possess." Sarah felt her enhanced senses analyzing the suppressor patterns, her consciousness automatically developing approaches that would render the enemy technology useless. The hegemony's devices were designed to disrupt quantum cognitive processing at specific frequencies, but those frequencies represented only the surface level of Black Talon abilities. "They're targeting the wrong neural pathways," she realized. "They think our enhancement works through quantum field manipulation of synaptic processes, but that's just the delivery mechanism for the real changes." Marcus nodded approvingly. "The true enhancement isn't in how we process information. It's in what we've become capable of perceiving. The suppressors can't block awareness itself, only the tools we use to analyze what we're aware of." The training facility around them began to reconfigure, creating a perfect replica of the battle raging around Proxima Station. Sarah found herself standing on the bridge of a GDF cruiser, surrounded by officers whose enhanced abilities had been neutralized by hegemony suppressor fields. "Your mission," Marcus said, "is to demonstrate why the hegemony's countermeasures are insufficient." Sarah closed her eyes and let her consciousness expand beyond the artificial limitations imposed by the enemy technology. The suppressors blocked certain types of quantum information processing, but they couldn't prevent her from perceiving the underlying patterns that governed reality itself. She could still see the probability streams, the causal relationships, the information structures that determined how events would unfold. The difference was in how she applied that perception. Instead of using quantum field manipulation to influence enemy decision-making, she began identifying the critical stress points in their tactical formation. Fleet movements that appeared coordinated revealed hidden vulnerabilities when examined from multiple dimensional perspectives. Command structures that seemed unified showed fracture lines that could be exploited through precisely applied pressure. Sarah opened her eyes and began issuing orders to the GDF fleet, her voice carrying an authority that transcended normal military hierarchy. Ships began moving in patterns that seemed random to conventional analysis, but which created cascading effects throughout the hegemony formation. "Engineering Team 7, adjust your reactor output by 0.03%, she commanded, her enhanced perception showing her how that microscopic change would alter the gravitational field in ways that would affect enemy navigation systems. "Weapon Station 4, delay your next salvo by exactly 2 seconds, she continued, seeing how that timing adjustment would cause a crucial hegemony ship to move into the firing line of its own allies. The effects began manifesting across the entire battle zone. Hegemony ships found themselves in positions they hadn't intended to occupy. Weapon systems fired at coordinates that had been calculated based on outdated positional data. Command decisions became increasingly erratic as officers struggled to understand why their tactical plans were failing. Impossible. Admiral Korthak snarled as his carefully coordinated assault dissolved into chaos. The suppressors are functioning at full capacity. The humans should be operating at baseline cognitive levels. What he was witnessing wasn't the result of enhanced cognitive processing. It was the manifestation of awareness that had evolved beyond the need for technological augmentation. Sarah wasn't manipulating quantum fields or influencing probability streams. She was simply seeing reality as it actually existed and making decisions based on complete rather than partial information. The hegemony fleet began to fracture as individual ships found themselves cut off from their support networks. What had appeared to be an overwhelming advantage revealed itself as a critical weakness when the enemy could predict and counter every tactical decision before it was implemented. Withdraw to secondary positions, Korthak ordered, his confidence shaken by the rapid collapse of his assault. Regroup and implement enhanced suppression protocols. But it was already too late. The Galactic Defense Force had revealed their true capabilities, and the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in ways that would reshape the future of every species in known space. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the ancient amphitheater on Centauri Prime, its crystalline walls humming with translation fields that carried urgent conversations between representatives of dozens of species. The news from Proxima Station had spread throughout Alliance space within hours, creating panic among governments that had believed themselves to understand the strategic balance of the galaxy. Ambassador Tanari of the Vortanian Collective stood at the central podium, her usually composed blue features showing signs of strain as she addressed the assembled delegates. Behind her, holographic displays showed tactical analyses of the recent battle that defied conventional understanding of military capabilities. "The data is unambiguous," Tanari announced, her melodic voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. "The human contribution to our defensive capabilities has been deliberately understated by a factor of approximately 10,000%. Shocked murmurs rippled through the amphitheater as delegates struggled to process the implications. The Corvallian war chief Balthak rose from his seat, his massive frame casting shadows across nearby representatives as he activated his speaking privileges. "This council demands an explanation," Balthak roared, his translated voice booming through the chamber. "For 4 decades, we have treated humans as junior partners in this alliance. If they possess capabilities that exceed our own, why was this information concealed?" General Varix materialized at the secondary podium through quantum transmission, his 4 eyes surveying the agitated assembly with practiced calm. The weight of decades of deception pressed against his consciousness as he prepared to reveal truths that would fundamentally alter galactic civilization. The concealment was necessary to prevent exactly this situation, Varix stated plainly. "Every species represented in this chamber has built its identity around claims of superiority in specific areas. Acknowledging human capabilities would have destabilized the alliance structure that has protected us all from hegemony expansion." Ambassador Zektor of the Thermal Reaches hissed through his environmental suit, the sound carrying undertones of betrayal and fear. "You mean to tell us that these humans have been manipulating our military strategies for 40 years? That every victory we believed we had earned was actually achieved through their intervention?" The holographic displays shifted to show classified battle reports from across the past 4 decades. In engagement after engagement, subtle indicators revealed the presence of human operatives whose actions had turned certain defeat into impossible victory. The pattern was unmistakable once revealed, painting a picture of a species whose strategic capabilities bordered on the supernatural. "Not manipulation," Varix corrected carefully. "Augmentation. Human operatives enhanced the effectiveness of existing forces rather than replacing them. The victories were genuine achievements by all Alliance members, but they were made possible through capabilities that most of you weren't ready to acknowledge." The admission sent shockwaves through the assembled representatives. Several delegates activated private communication channels, urgently contacting their home governments with the implications of this revelation. The entire foundation of galactic power structure was crumbling in real time. Sarah Chen stepped through the quantum transmission portal, her presence immediately recognized by delegates who had studied the Proxima Station battle footage. The mark on her shoulder was visible through her dress uniform, its simple design somehow more intimidating than any weapon or insignia of rank. "With respect to this council," Sarah said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested depths of capability, beyond normal understanding. The question isn't why this information was concealed. The question is what we do now that concealment is no longer possible. The atmospheric tension in the chamber became palpable as delegates realized they were in the presence of an actual Black Talon operative. Sarah's enhanced awareness mapped their emotional states with crystalline clarity, revealing fear, awe, resentment, and desperate curiosity in complex patterns that painted a complete picture of the Council's psychological dynamics. The hegemony assault on Proxima Station was designed to force this revelation, Sarah continued. They wanted to shatter Alliance unity by exposing our capabilities, gambling that fear and resentment would accomplish what their military forces could not. Ambassador Tanari leaned forward, her analytical mind struggling to process the strategic implications. Are you suggesting that this entire situation is part of a larger hegemony psychological warfare campaign? Sarah nodded, her enhanced perception showing her the probability streams that flowed from this moment into potential futures. They're banking on the assumption that other species will reject human partnership once they understand our true capabilities. They believe fear will accomplish what force cannot. The Zelexian collective mind representative spoke through its central consciousness node, its shared thoughts carrying the weight of billions of individual perspectives. The concern is not without merit. If humans possess abilities that transcend our own, what assurance do we have that this partnership will remain voluntary? The question hung in the air like a physical presence, touching on the deepest fears that drove interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. Sarah felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge, with the future of galactic civilization dependent on how she chose to respond. The same assurance you've always had, she said simply. We chose to help rather than conquer when we first encountered your civilizations. We chose to enhance your victories rather than claim them as our own. We chose to remain hidden rather than demand recognition for our contributions. Sarah's consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of the amphitheater, touching the information streams that connected every world in Alliance space. She could see the fear spreading through populations as news of human capabilities reached them. But she could also see something else. Hope born of understanding that their protectors were far more capable than anyone had imagined. The choice remains the same today, Sarah continued. We can work together to face the hegemony threat, or we can allow fear to fragment the Alliance and face extinction separately. General Varric stepped forward, his expression grave as he activated new holographic displays showing real-time intelligence from hegemony space. The decision must be made quickly. Our sources indicate that the enemy is preparing a second wave, assault designed to exploit any political instability caused by these revelations. The tactical displays showed hegemony fleets massing at strategic positions throughout their territory, their movements coordinated in ways that suggested knowledge of Alliance internal politics. The enemy had indeed planned this revelation as part of a larger strategy to destroy their opponents through division, rather than direct confrontation. How long do we have? Ambassador Tanari asked, her diplomatic training overriding her personal concerns as she focused on the immediate threat. Sarah's enhanced perception analyzed the enemy fleet movements, processing thousands of variables to calculate probability matrices for potential assault scenarios. 72 hours until the first wave reaches Alliance territory, perhaps a week before the full assault begins. The council chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the impossible choice before them. Trust in a species whose capabilities they had never truly understood, or face the hegemony threat divided and vulnerable. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance.